Alright. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Hey, what's up guys? This is Kent for TalkAndroid.com and fellow HTC lover. Oh my god, we've got the HTC U11. We're doing a review for it. We're not even going to do a review. There's nothing to review because it's just so amazing. Oh my god. So let's take a look at it. 5.5 inch. It's just a brilliant display. It doesn't have the secondary display that the U Ultra has, but who needs it? This is the U11. It's perfect. I give it a 10 out of 10. And what about HTC Edge Sense? I mean, a lot of people are like, what a gimmick, that's dumb. But you know what I think? I think it's brilliant. You can look, you just do this the squeezy thing and the camera opens and you can open apps and like, oh, it's just, who on this planet would have thought that? I mean, like, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous. My rating is a 10. Now, my favorite thing when you're using the HTC U11 is that it just has a great feel in the hand. Its build quality is solid. You could throw this at a terrorist and it would knock him unconscious, and then you could take a picture of him because you're the guy, the victorious guy. Best phone ever? That's not even a question. It is the best phone ever. Good night, everybody. Wait, stop. I think the HTC people have already gone. They've probably already left their angry comment down below calling me a doofus. So if you're actually interested to see what might make this phone work and why it doesn't work, let's take a look. Now, since we're giving it a more proper treatment, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the specs. Now, before we even start, you probably noticed that I wasn't even holding the right phone for the first part of that review. This is actually the Honor 6X. Yeah, I actually already sent off the HTC U11 a little while ago so that fellow Talk Android writer Jared could do his review on it. So we didn't have that much time with the phone. We had to kind of keep things moving, so I already sent it off. And yeah, I figured that since that first part was hardly serious, it wouldn't matter what phone I held. Anyway, so looking at the specs, we've got a 5.5 inch Super LCD 5 display, 1440 by 2560 resolution with Gorilla Glass 5. We are running Android 7.1 with HTC Sense UI and a Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor and an Adreno 540 GPU running under the hood. Storage-wise, we've got 64 gigs of onboard storage and 4 gigs of RAM. Now the 128GB model does have 6 gigs of RAM. And the phone still supports a micro SD card slot. Taking a look at the camera, on the rear we've got a 12 megapixel f1.7 camera, and on the front we've got our 16 megapixel f2.0 camera. On the bottom we've got a USB Type-C port, and then we do have a fingerprint scanner there on the front. The phone is IP67 dust and water resistant, and powering all this we've got a 3000 milliamp hour battery. Now taking a look at the hardware, we've got pretty much the same build that we had on the U Ultra. I say pretty much, it looks identical. So we've got the same metal and glass build. It does have a little bit of a chunkier build. It seems to sort of curve out on the back. Now I don't necessarily mind this. I mean, thin phones are nice, but with it having a little bit of that chunkier look to it, it sits nicely in the hand and has a really nice weight to it. Now, as with the U Ultra and with the super shiny finish, it is a fingerprint magnet. This thing smudges horrendously. I mean, you can even look at the footage here. That was after I wiped it down for half an hour. Now on the side there, it does have our textured power button. I quite like a textured power button. It has a nice responsive feel under the thumb, and it's easy to set it apart from all the other buttons. It sits it aside from the volume rocker. Whatever. And the buttons do have quite a bit of travel and are really clicky, which is nice. Now the fingerprint scanner on the bottom is really responsive. I don't think I really had very many, if any, missed reads when I was using it, so it works really well and it's really quick to unlock the phone. Now my complaint with this fingerprint scanner is the same as my complaint with a lot of other fingerprint scanners, in that it doesn't have a very distinctive feel beneath the thumb. Now, thankfully, it is sensibly placed on the bottom portion of the phone, right in the middle, so it's a very natural place to rest your thumb to unlock the phone. However, I think it would have taken it the extra mile if it was like recessed into the phone, sort of similar to what the Moto G5 did. Now, looking around the other edges of the phone, there is no headphone jack, which I don't really understand here. Other phones took it away for a utilitarian reason, or at least that's what the manufacturers claimed. I mean, Apple took away the headphone jack to make room for the haptic feedback motor in the home button, and Motorola took it away from their phone so that they could make the phone even thinner than it really needed to be. So when you look at something like the HTC, I mean, it does have vibration feedback in the home button or near the home button, but it is, like I said, pretty thick, and I think there's plenty of room in there for a headphone jack. So why they've continued to shutter that feature is sort of a weird one to me. Thankfully, this time it does come with a USB-C to 1/8 inch adapter in the box, but still kind of a weird choice. Now, battery life was decent. It held up with most of the other flagships. Overall, I was pulling between like maybe 12 to 14 hours in a single charge throughout the day. But you think, again, with the thicker back on the phone, that they would have fit a bigger battery in there than the 3000 milliamp hour. I mean, like I said, the 3000 suffices, but I'm just trying to figure out why this phone feels as chunky as it does. Now, what most of that battery is powering is the display, and the display, like I said, is a 5.5 inch display. No secondary display like the U Ultra, which is good. And this display has great visibility all around. It holds up really well in direct sunlight. Now, what I did notice with the display is that with the colors, it did err a little more on the bluish side of things, and that seems to be a consistent carryover from the U Ultra. Alright, onto the camera. I've never liked using HTC's cameras. I thought they were always really underwhelming compared to the other flagships on the market, and this has been consistent for the last few iterations that HTC has put out. They were always touting their ultra pixel technology and how well it performed in low light, but I just never really had fond memories of it being that great, especially when you compare it to like the S7 or the S8. But that's changed here. This is the first HTC camera that I've been genuinely impressed with. Now, overall, it had really great clarity, it had really good resolution, dynamic range was solid, but what I was really impressed by was the raw image capture. I took a bunch of photos while I was out on the road when I had this phone, and you can see from just me fooling around here in the raw image, it holds a lot of dynamic range and it keeps really solid color accuracy. Now, obviously, this lends itself really well to editing and post-production, which I'm probably gonna do. I've got some ideas for like cool album covers and stuff like that. But nonetheless, even noise performance seemed to hold up a lot better in these raw images. Just overall, I was really impressed when I pulled up the raw images and compared it to the JPEG, which, like I said, the JPEG still look good, but man, those raw images. So yeah, I didn't hate using this camera, especially with the Edge Sense shortcut, which I'll get to. That's not to say I like Edge Sense, but whatever, we'll get to it. But yeah, I still don't know why the front camera has a higher resolution sensor than the rear camera, and this is sort of proof that it's not all in the numbers as far as resolution goes, because you can see from the front camera, I mean, yeah, it looks good, but there's sort of softness towards the edges, the noise performance isn't as good, and then when you look at the rear images, they, like I said, they hold up really well. Video at full HD looked really good in sunlight, and the image stabilization worked really well. It wasn't super wobbly or anything, so that was nice to see. Now, let's jump over to software. So, Jared and I were tossing notes back and forth about the phones when he said something that I think really sums up the issues that HTC is having. HTC doesn't understand why people like phones. And when I asked him to elaborate, a lot of it started to click for me. There's a really sort of crude amalgamation of different product tie-ins and branding attempts that make the entire experience feel sort of half-baked. I mean, I think part of the problem is being exacerbated by this particular model being a Sprint model, and I've always hated how much extra nonsense Sprint throws in. I mean, all carriers do this, but Sprint is the only one I've seen where they actually show you installing all the stuff that you can't get rid of. So you get things thrown in like Tidal that nobody really cares about, I'm sorry Jay-Z, and News Republic won't stop giving you updates. I feel like I can't escape this app. And does anybody remember that HTC had a really big product tie-in with Under Armour for a little while? Like, there's an Under Armour app on the phone, and I haven't seen anything on the product side in a while. I don't know, I just feel like on the brand side of things, HTC is just grasping at straws and trying to throw it all at us and be like, hey, do you like some of that? You have it. I mean, at this point, you might as well include an Ouya tie-in and throw a Zune app in there. But yeah, it was just interesting. Jared and I share a lot of the same opinions on devices, but he and I sort of butt heads in certain areas. And when he elaborated on what his experience was in HTC's UI, a lot of it started to make more sense to me. F you, Jared. Now, moving on to another interesting software and I guess kind of a hardware feature that HTC has rolled out with this device, HTC Edge Sense. So setting up HTC Edge Sense is kind of weird, and the setup process can be a bit misleading. You saw when I initially set it up in the unboxing video that I was squeezing it a little bit too hard. I mean, it does say squeeze the phone, and I'm not really sure how to take that. So when I set the initial squeeze force level, I had set it too high, and you can manually adjust this. What I would advise if you're using this feature, if you're setting it up, is I wouldn't even bother squeezing the phone to calibrate that sensitivity. I would just dial it in. I had to dial it in one of the lowest settings, and once you have it set there, it's a little bit easier to use. But yeah, anything beyond that, I don't know why you would set it that way. It's really excessive. But then again, baby hands. That also means they have the proportionate speed and strength of a baby. This feature is gimmicky at best. I find minimal functionality with it. And I say minimal, it's not like it's entirely without use. I briefly mentioned earlier that the camera shortcut was actually kind of nice. Basically, you can squeeze the edges to open up your camera, which at first I thought was going to feel really clunky. I mean, you probably remember or don't remember me mentioning this in the unboxing video. But yeah, once I started to actually get in there and use it, it was pretty natural just holding the phone in my hand and squeezing the edges, and hey, there's the camera. But that was about it. Doing anything else with it was kind of weird. What I mean by that is it was, at best, it was awkward, and at worst, it was hilariously slow. Now, squeezing to open the camera is natural, I guess, but squeezing to take a photo jostles the camera and throws off your composition. Now, to compensate for this, there's a little bit of a lag after you squeeze the phone. The camera waits a second and then it takes a picture, which is great for not having super blurry pictures, but it means that you can miss out on some of those key moments if you're trying to grab a photo real quick. Now, there's an advanced set of features with HTC Edge Sense where you can squeeze and hold to access more features. This can be anything from opening an app to opening an app, I guess. I didn't really get into it beyond that. But I find with this that if you have the squeeze and hold function tied to opening an app, it's often slower than just unlocking the phone and opening the app, especially if you have a shortcut for it on your home screen. And my favorite is squeezing and holding to switch from the rear camera to the front camera. It is hilariously slow compared to just moving your thumb down and tapping the switch camera button. I mean, you can even see in this side-by-side here. Something else Jared mentioned about this, and keep in mind, this review wasn't written by Jared. He and I just sort of shared a lot of thoughts about this device. But he was able to contextualize it in an interesting way. And he mentioned that it's kind of a weird choice to have a feature like Edge Sense, considering that all the phones have been going from tactile buttons to touchscreens to gesture-based functions. And HTC is bringing it back to hardware interaction, which, I mean, I admire the attempt at novelty, I guess, but it is kind of a weird choice when you think about it. By the way, like I said, this isn't Jared's review. Jared actually had a much harsher look on Edge Sense. So if you want to look at his take, make sure you take a look at his review, which I will link in the description below. I almost forgot HTC Sense Companion. So HTC Sense Companion is HTC's proprietary voice assistant thing, because everyone has to have their own voice assistant now. And as you've probably remembered me mentioning before, I don't really get a whole lot of use out of voice assistants. And this one seems even less useful than the others. But nonetheless, I went in and I set it up the same way I did on the U Ultra, which is to say I went through and I turned all the permissions on and hit continue. And then it tells you that all you have to do is wait, and soon enough it'll start pushing really useful suggestions out to you once it starts to get to know you. The results are the same as they were with the U Ultra, which is to say that I had the phone for a couple of weeks, and as I was using it, HTC Sense Companion would give me a suggestion like, hey, I can give you useful traffic updates. Would you like that suggestion turned on? And I would hit yes, and then it would say, you've already turned this feature on. And it did that for every single feature. It's funny because Jared and I were actually talking about this, and I was relaying my experience of HTC Sense Companion to him, and as I was telling him this, he actually got the exact same notification as he was using the device. So yeah, like I said, I had it for a couple of weeks. If HTC Sense Companion has a use besides reminding you that it's there, I haven't seen it yet. And even if it does have a use, taking more than 2 or 3 weeks for it to actually start working seems to be a bit of a stretch. So it's been roughly 3 months and we've seen 2 flagships from HTC, if the U Ultra could be considered a flagship, which at its initial launch price tag, I would call it a flagship. But where do we sit now with the U11? Well, compared to the U Ultra, the U11 is a triumphant success. On its own, It's fine. I mean, besides its cheesy mirror finish and HTC Edge Sense, it doesn't really feature anything particularly unique to set it apart, at least not anything really that useful. But I am pleased to see a truly standout camera, especially considering, again, this is an HTC. But even when you couple that with its premium, sturdy feeling build, it's really hard to justify flagship pricing for this device, especially at such a competitive time of the year. So, what do you think about the U11? And no, I do not care what your opinion is if you're one of the HTC fan people who are trying to get free swag from HTC for bashing a negative review, which, by the way, my review was lukewarm at best. Again, if you want a negative review, go take a look at Jared's review. But genuinely, if you are curious about this phone, or if you just sort of wandered into a carrier store and bought this device, what do you think about it? Do you get any genuine use out of Edge Sense? And has HTC Sense Companion done anything else for you besides reminding you, hey, I'm a thing, I'm here? I mean, this review is already gonna get bashed to hell because of this whole fight against negative critiques thing. But whatever, let's try and fight the noise, have an actual discussion in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Until next time, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. My name is Ken for TalkAndroid.com. Now, the overall aesthetic of